You see this king? This one right here? We're gonna make him dizzy. First, disclaimer, as you can tell by the intro, I'm not a master, but I've come a long way. So while I can't do an insane number of spins or do all the spinning moves, I think I have good tips that can help you to improve as well. And really, the biggest tip is to just practice. Typically, when we do moves, we worry about dropping cards, so we tighten our grip on them. But these spinning moves rely on having the perfect pressure, which means having as loose of a grip as possible without dropping the cards. And doing that will take practice. But there are other factors that can make your practice less effective, so that is what these tips are for. And I'm going to give you tips for 3.5 specific moves and then some general tips at the end. So let's begin with Spitfire. Let's start with Spitfire by Franky Morales. For the grip, I use my ring finger and thumb because it gives me the most space to spin the cards without hitting my hand, since I have small hands and can't do the pinky and thumb grip. But you can also use your middle finger and thumb, whatever feels best. Now the key point is that for me, I like to have the corner of the cards slightly above the middle of the pads of my ring finger and thumb. I feel like I'm able to get more spins this way, but it's also good to experiment with the position. Another way to increase the number of spins is by angling your non-dominant hand down as you pull the cards down to add more torque. So your non-dominant hand is going downward and you kind of turn your palm face down while your dominant hand goes upward. Next is Windchill, also by Franky, which is similar to Spitfire in terms of gripping the packet, but for this move, you blow on the cards to initiate the spin. I'm not going to go over it much here because I can't actually do it, but also because Shin Lim does a good job of explaining how to do the move, and he also goes over the difference between strong and a slow, consistent force. So just be sure to blow on the bottom corner and not the middle of the packet. And don't get too lightheaded to where you pass out. Now for the Ohio Kickflip. Just kidding, the one-handed kickflip by Linus Schmidt. This move will work your ring finger. It will get tired and it's an awkward position. And that flicking motion with your ring finger will likely be weak at first. You may only be able to reach 90 degrees at first, but if you can hit a 180 degree spin, then you know that 360 degrees is in sight. Another thing is that after the kick motion, you want to angle your hand upward in the direction of the spin to accompany the momentum. So your hand should start almost palm down, and then once you kick it, it needs to rotate up slightly. The good thing about this move is that you can practice it with other corner grip spins or other corner grip moves like ATM, Lego Love, whatever else, and you can practice it with combos, so you can practice all different moves in one single session. So this one is quite easy to practice because you can just do it again and again. It's good to square up the cards when you do this, which you can just do by using your middle finger and thumb. You've just got to keep kicking it. Now I will go over the general tips. First, it's good to use smaller packets. Now the number of cards kind of depends on the move, so I would say at the least 3 cards, but also at the most 6 cards. And of course you want the packets to be square or squared up before and after spinning. So a packet between 3 to 6 cards give you just enough weight to build momentum, but not so much that they're hard to spin. Now again, the number of cards depends on the move. So for example, Spitfire, if you want to do it once, maybe get 4 cards, but if you want to be able to practice it multiple times in a row, maybe get 6 cards. For OH Kickflip, I would say maybe 5 cards, unless you're doing it in a combo with ATM or Lego Love, then you might need more cards, like 7 cards even, since you're going to be peeling off cards and losing cards. Another key tip is that you want the cards to have few gaps in them, or else the air will get caught between those gaps and cause the packets to split. So you want cards that are not too bendy or worn out, but also not too new, as new decks tend to be slippery of course, and will therefore split. So I recommend using a broken end deck. And also you want the cards to have sharp edges or sharp corners, because those are better than soft edges and rounded corners. Wow, that's horrible. I find that stiffer cards, or what I consider stocky or blocky, tend to be good for this. By stocky or blocky, I mean that they are not necessarily clumpy, but easy to break off, and they just feel crisp and clean. Hopefully that makes sense. But my advice is to just look at your deck collection if you have a variety of cards, and experiment and play around with cards to see what deck feels best to you. Now, trainers are typically a good example of sharp corners and even beveled edges. Another good thing about trainers is that they have significantly more weight without the drawback of having more cards splitting. And in fact, I can even do kickflip with trainers, which I can't do with a normal 52 deck of cards. On the other hand, I have these homemade wooden trainers. Some of the corners are rounded, some of them are sharper, but also they do not have those beveled edges. So while I can do spins with them, I prefer the jelly trainers. Now, most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, you want as loose of a grip as possible without dropping the cards. So you want to experiment with finger placement and feel what is best for you. Once you get that first smooth spin, you'll start getting that muscle memory, and that kind of signals to your brain what you want to achieve. Another note though is that you probably don't want to practice with sweaty hands because that moisture causes more friction while the cards are spinning, so it's a good idea to wash your hands and dry them. Finally, the best thing about these moves is that they are relatively short and you can practice them again and again, except for maybe something like Spitfire where you'll run out of cards. If you do drop cards from that spinning packet, you're only going to drop those 3 to 6 cards. So you can practice more of these moves in 1 minute than you can other moves like Sybil. And that's great because you will probably be spending hours, days, months, even years to practice. But trust me, I think it's worth it because you can get some really good spins and just be a cool person. Alright, so now that we've wrapped up with the tips, I'm going to go over the hardest move. Not the ones I just mentioned, not the Leno cut, not curly Q, not even padiddle, but the dreaded job application. Obviously, I'm not actually going to talk about a job application, but I'll admit I probably need a job to help pay for college and compensate for my card spending. Also, update on the card storage, not that anyone asked. I reorganized my cassette shelf and Lego or bookshelf, and I've actually kind of cleared the top of most of my Legos and kind of crammed them all at the bottom. I completely filled my cassette drawer with a bunch of sealed cards and standard cards like I said I would, and to help free up space on the cassette shelf, I put a lot of decks in the Dan and Dave and Tier 11 brick boxes, and I also put cards in my shoebox. I still have some cards that don't really have a good home, so I'm still looking for more card storage, but I did also get these 2 large frames, 27 by 40 inches, so I probably won't fill them until I get to college, but you might see an Instagram post on that in August, so be sure to follow me on Instagram if you don't already for extra card content. But I'll probably also have these frames to be in portrait instead of landscape, or vertical instead of horizontal. So yeah, that's the end of this video. Hopefully it was helpful and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next time.